My name is Linda Lorelle, and I'm asking you to have the courage to listen with an open mind to all of our voices, because our voices matter. Hi, everybody. It's Linda Lorelle, and this is our Voices Matter podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot to talk about. And I'm very excited because my partner in crime and Civil Dialogue's co-founder, Jean Becker, is joining me for today's episode. And for those of you who don't already know, Jean is the chief of staff, or was the chief of staff, to President Bush 41 during his post-presidency. So she's joining me for today's episode to follow up to the Civil Dialogue's town hall that we hosted together in St. Louis on March 6th. So that was about 6 weeks or so into President Trump's second term. The topic was the people, the president, and the Constitution, your questions answered. And we had quite the conversation reflecting multiple points of view. So a whole heck of a lot has happened since then, as you know. So we decided to build upon that conversation with two of our panelists, Jay Sexton with the Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy and Steve Davis with the Pacific Legal Foundation. But before they join us, we want to talk a little bit first about what's top of mind for each one of us as we go into this conversation. So Jean, I'm going to let you jump in first.
Linda, if we'd had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have said something totally different. I've been struggling a lot with what's in the news with the Middle East, with the assassination in Minnesota, with military parades, with, I just feel like we're on the wrong track right now. But for reasons I will not bore our wonderful audience, I just took a 4,500 mile road trip through our country. I left Houston, Texas on June 2nd. I got home on Tuesday night, June 17th, 4,500 miles later, went through 24 states, crossed into Canada. And the thing that I came away with, and keep in mind, I was in the South, I was in the Northeast, I was in the Midwest. I came away knowing that what unites us is still more powerful than what divides us. And yes, we don't agree with each other on the current politics of the moment or the direction the country should be taking. But we live in a great country. We live in a beautiful country. And I think if we just talk to each other, share with each other our feelings, try to get to understand each other a little more, I think more people need to get in their car and drive randomly around the country like I did and just get to know the people who's out there. And while you're at it, go see Niagara Falls. I just saw it for the first time. But I'm feeling better.
I'm glad you reminded me because I definitely want to.
But I'm feeling better about our country, Linda. And it doesn't mean that when I turn on CNN in a few minutes, I might be immediately like, oh my God. But I'm optimistic. We're going to get there.
Well, I'm glad you reminded me about going to see Niagara Falls again. I think I saw it when I was like 4 years old and I don't remember it. So it's time for me to go back. Okay. But I digress. Okay. So this whole idea of obviously talking to each other. And I love that you shared how much your road trip gave you hope. And it's giving me hope. So thank you for that because I really need it. So as I was preparing for today's conversation, I rewatched our St. Louis event, which was actually quite good. I'm really proud.
It really was.
It was a really, really good event. So for those of you who are watching and listening now, and we're not in the audience, and that's the vast majority of you, please go to civildialogues.us, our website, and click on the link for the people, the president, and the Constitution, and you can watch it. It's really worth watching. And one of the things that came to mind as you were talking, Jean, was something that one of our panelists, Abby Ramirez, said. Abby is now a graduate of the University of Missouri School of Journalism, Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy. And she was quite brilliant on the panel. And she talked about growing up in Los Angeles as a Democrat and then moving to Columbia, Missouri to attend college, which is right in the middle of a ruby red state, and being exposed to alternative points of view. Whereas before, she used to always think she was right in what she believed, and her mind was very much closed. And as a result of having moved to a different environment and taking the time to listen to what people who believe and grew up differently than she did, it completely changed her frame of reference. It opened her mind. It didn't necessarily change her core beliefs, but she's a lot more open-minded and more willing to engage in conversation with people who don't necessarily believe what she does. And I thought that's exactly what Civil Dialogues is trying to achieve. And it's what you and I really believed and still believe, and it's the reason we started Civil Dialogues, is that grassroots one-on-one conversation, eyeball to eyeball, is what's going to help get us out of this mess that we're in.
It really is. And again, just getting to know each other will help. And I will add to my travelogue advice, watch the local news. When you're in Buffalo, New York, or Morristown, Tennessee, or Rogers, Arkansas, spending the night, don't watch CNN, don't watch Fox, watch the local news. Find out what people are talking about, what they're worried about, what's making the big news. And Linda, I hate to say this, but I'm really proud of us for coming up with Civil Dialogues, for deciding to do this, because I do think civil dialogue is what is going to get us back to being friends and to being like each other, and to learn to agree to disagree. I can remember listening and watching President Bush and President Clinton argue politics, and they loved arguing politics, and then they would go play golf with each other.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to get back to.
We got to get back
We got to get back to it.
So the St. Louis event was extremely well received, well attended, and it led to the Kansas City Public Library reaching out to us and asking us to bring that same program, The People, the President, and the Constitution, to Kansas City. So we hit the road July 22nd. For those of you who will be in the Kansas City area on July 22nd, please come join us. If not, you will be able to live stream it around the country. But it's encouraging that people want to know and understand and get their arms around what's happening in the country. I feel that we're on the cusp of Americans actually engaging in our democratic process in much larger numbers than we have been in recent years.
I think so too.
Yeah. So that makes me feel good. And with that, we're going to bring in our guests for today's episode. So thanks again for joining us, and let's get right to it. Jay and Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I'm going to read some short bios so people know exactly who you are. Jay Sexton, of course, is the director of the University of Missouri's Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy, a nonpartisan center for the teaching and study of the founding and history of the United States. And in your classes, Jay, I'm told that students explore how the fate of American constitutional democracy has always been inseparable from the global fortunes of democracy. And Steve Davis, you are a senior legal fellow at Pacific Legal Foundation, a nonprofit public interest law firm that defends Americans' liberties when threatened by government overreach and abuse. And Steve, you previously served as the chief clerk and administrator of the Missouri House of Representatives, an assistant United States attorney, and as the Missouri Election Day operations director for the Mitt Romney 2012 presidential campaign. It is so good to see both of you. Thank you so much for agreeing to have a follow-up conversation to the one that we had in St. Louis, The People, the President, and the Constitution. So a lot has happened since March 6th. It's kind of been like drinking from a fire hose, trying to keep up with all of it. But here's where I'd like to start. I remember asking the question at that time as to whether we were in a constitutional crisis. And one of the answers was, and Steve, I think this was you who said that we're not in a crisis right now. Again, this was March 6th. And you said, we'll have a crisis if the president actively undermines and fails to obey the Supreme Court. So I'm going to ask again, are we in a constitutional crisis? And Jay, I'm going to put you on the hot seat since I just quoted you. I'm going to let you start us off, and then we'll let Jay chime in. So go ahead, Steve.
I haven't seen the president as undermining the court, but correct me if I'm wrong. It appears what I noticed recently was when he ordered the National Guard into L.A. to help with riots there. I believe I saw today that that had gone up to the Court of Appeals and had ruled in the president's favor that he could command the National Guard in that way. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'm not aware of any undermining going on yet, but please correct me. So I think we're in the same spot.
I'm gonna ask a follow-up question, and I can see you dying to jump in here, Jay. But here's my follow-up, because I would say that there are a lot of folks who believe that the president disobeyed the Supreme Court when they told him to bring back Kilmar Abreu Garcia, and it took 2 or 3 months for that to happen. There are some other there are other cases that I could cite as well, but that's the first one that comes to mind. So in your mind, is that not the president disobeying what the Supreme Court says?
I think the administration could be perceived as disobeying the lower court judge. In that case, that was the Supreme Court. 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 So Jay, I'm going to let you jump in. Go ahead.
Oh gosh, I mean, I think, but now going back to March 6th when we last talked, I think more people think we're in a crisis, and I think that's really what fundamentally matters, when more people think that, because then that creates that crisis atmosphere. I think the Garcia case is the most troubling one if you're defining this in a kind of narrow constitutional sense, that it's when the president disobeys or attempts to push the boundaries of legal norms and ultimately kind of backs down, but not really. That's kind of like what the Trump administration does, but that's what a lot of administrations have done in the past. So there's that. But can I just say one other thing about, your question about a crisis? That's one way of defining it. But the other way of defining a crisis, and you think historically, is when, on all kinds of different aspects of public life, settled, established ways of doing things, norms, are upended. And so it's not just that we have these constitutional questions that are creating confrontations in our high political system. It's the emergence of social protest in the last couple of weeks, and indeed social unrest in Los Angeles, among other places. It is the fact that things like the Garcia case don't just involve us, they involve partner client states in Central America. You've got the geopolitical crises of the expedited Russian invasion of Ukraine and the increased bombing there. And then, of course, we are sitting here on the tinderbox right now wondering what's happening in the Near East with Israel and Iran. So it's just like crises historically are contagious. They kind of go from one realm of life to another. And that's what's been most troubling to me in the last couple of months, rather than just anything that the president himself has done.
Jean, what are your thoughts based upon sort of what's happened in the 3 months since we last got together, and then hearing what Jay and Steve have just shared?
It's getting harder and harder for me to participate in civil dialogue because my frustration is big right now. And if the President Trump were to call me for advice, and of course he wouldn't listen to it, but what I would say is get off social media, which he will never do. It is so unprofessional and so unpresidential how he makes his opinions known on social media. And it frustrates me to no end. And the other thing I would say to him is being president of the United States is not reality television. And I think those two aspects of his presidency have gotten worse since January 20th. That, he communicates with us by talking to the press on the South Lawn or by social media. And we need to know, and we have a right to know what's going on. I'm also frustrated by Congress, the do nothing Congress. The third branch of government, in my opinion, is completely missing. And if I were to vote tomorrow, I would simply vote against all incumbents. So see, this is not civil dialogue on my part. But on the other hand, the whole purpose of civil dialogue is for us to keep talking to each other. So I could have tried to, sugarcoat it and put icing on it and be a little nicer, but instead I'm just telling you exactly what I think.
Well, and I think that's important. I mean, we all need to be able to say exactly what we think and how we're feeling. And, we're going to continue having civil dialogue as difficult as it sometimes is. The whole idea of social media, I'm glad you brought that up, Jean, and I want to sort of broaden that out to the sort of the mainstream media landscape. And I'm reminded of something that we talked about, and I thought it was a really interesting point, Steve, that you made in our St. Louis event, where you talked about how the media needs to calm down a bit and listen a little bit more, and that headlines that were calling Trump an authoritarian at that time were not helping the situation, and that reporters and citizens need to be willing to go a little bit deeper and not just throw out incendiary things like that. I'd love for you to get your perspective on that now, because I would say that some certainly will agree with you, and there are others who feel that the media are really giving him a pass, that these are not normal times, and that we should not normalize this behavior, and that the press should not be covering him and his administration in the way they typically would cover and have covered every other presidential administration. So I would love to get your thoughts on that, and then yours as well, Jay. So go ahead, Steve.
I've always been frustrated with the media and its coverage and the lack of analysis and telling the whole story. Now, I will admit, definitely, and touching on what I agree with what Jean and Jay have said, President Trump is not helping himself, and it's not just limited to social media anymore. I mean, I believe I saw him yesterday. A reporter was asking him about something that his director of national intelligence had said, and his response was, "I don't care what she said. This is what I say." And I think that's not helpful to the situation. And a lot of people, including me, found it refreshing early on that the president would speak his mind, and candidate Trump would tell us what he really thought. I think his varied statements have been confusing, and I don't think it's helpful to say that we can take out the leader of another country if we feel like it, and it may come to that. So yes, I do think the media should do a better job, and they still should, but I acknowledge they have a hard job to do.
I mean, there's some green shoots here on the media front in recent months. You think about I don't know, the Atlantic Monthly. So I renewed my subscription after the Signalgate scandal, and found that that is high quality stuff pumped out weekly, daily. The fears that the Washington Post would turn into a MAGA propaganda bullhorn, those haven't been borne out. I know there's significant changes in the editorial board, but the paper is still really a reliable, good source of news. So I think that the media always thinks that the media is on the verge of collapse, just kind of like professors. We always think higher ed's on the verge of collapse. And that's another example, actually, of an institution that has withstood the barrage. Obviously, it's done some great damage, those cuts in funding streams and just the kind of arrangement of how universities are funded, but they're still around, and actually some are coming out of this crisis stronger. So I think part of it is just flipping how we look at this question, not always thinking that the glass half empty. Sometimes the glass is half full.
So I'm really glad you brought up the universities, because I wanted to talk about that. Just what appears to be, at least in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of folks, the attempt of the administration to make universities, law firms, et cetera, bend to the will of the president, which seems so out of bounds and out of the obviously out of the norm. What right does he have to determine whether, who should get into Harvard University, a private institution? As someone who is working at a private institution, I would love to know what your take is on this, and also what kinds of conversations you may or may not have had with your students in your constitutional democracy classes before the end of this last term.
Well, I mean, I think the headline here is that those universities that have capitulated, just like those law firms that have capitulated, have not been rewarded for doing so. And I think that's a really important headline from this kind of first phase of this issue. I think the subheader is that there is good coming out of Trump's assault on higher ed, in the sense that it is catalyzing and hastening a long overdue period of internal self-directed reform. I mean, the universities have to reform. We have to get better. We have to appeal to Americans from across the nation and across political divides. We cannot turn in on ourselves and become a kind of left-wing cocoon. And the good that's come out of this is those on the inside of universities like myself, who've been attempting to make progress on that front for a long time, now have a little bit more of a platform, now have more traction and momentum, not because we advocate what Trump is doing, but because he's made it clear that the future of universities are imperiled if they continue on the course that they've long been on. So again, I'm just being optimistic here, but in parts because Jean opened up with a downer, saying that she was done with civil dialogues, and actually, we're just getting started. We're just getting started.
Let me just tell the two of you what I told Linda earlier. I just drove 4,500 miles across this country, from Houston to New Orleans to Washington, D.C., to New Hampshire to Maine, to Niagara Falls, to Louisville, Kentucky, to Missouri, including the Ozarks, through Arkansas, Oklahoma, back to Texas. 24 states and one country, Canada. So I've seen more of this country in the last 16 days than probably every living American, except maybe a truck driver. And I told Linda that it's made me optimistic, that I still think that what unites us is more powerful than what divides us, and that I think civil dialogue is more important than ever. It does make me sad that the key to my optimism is not to watch the news, and that's not normal, and that's unfortunate. So no, I am optimistic, and I think we'll get through this. And I think civil dialogue is the key to it. But as I said, Jay, in my opening comments, which you call the downer, this is how I'm feeling right now. And since we're talking about higher education, as a former member of the Fulbright board, let me just say that when the entire Fulbright board resigned, that's horrible. That's horrible for our education here in the United States. It's horrible for our Fulbright students who are supposed to go overseas. That's a disaster. And that's something that a lot of Americans don't even know. But, and if they did see it or read it, they may not understand how monumental that was. They resigned en masse, as the three of you probably know. So it's sort of hard to stay optimistic when I think every single day you read at least one thing like that.
Yeah. I mean, can I just jump in really quick on that? I mean, that was a disturbing one, and part of this real troubling trend of, building tariff walls of all sorts around our country. And obviously, that's another big thing that happened since we last talked, was all the tariffs, which are crazy, going to do a lot of economic harm. But, we shut down foreign international graduate students coming into our universities, foreign professors coming in. That had always been so central to our power. Our soft power is that we attracted the best minds, the best innovators. And if they stayed here, good for our economy, good for our society. If they went back to their home countries, even better, because then there was a sort of pro-American educated elite. I mean, that's kind of the basis of our post-1945 power. You see it in universities. You see it in economic terms. You see it just in immigration in general. That's another big thing I'm sure we'll talk about. So this building of walls is, it's not like a crisis right away, but you think about the long-term damage that this is doing to our standing in the world. That's something that's most concerning about it. So, Jean, you got me doom and gloom now. Is that what you're trying to do? This is all premeditated?
I was trying to drag you into my rabbit hole. But
no doom and gloom. Go ahead, Jean.
I was just going to say, talking about tariffs, an observation from my road trip, crossing to Canada at Niagara Falls and coming back into the United States, going through customs. There's a special lane for trucks. That's cars, and then trucks get their own lane. Not one truck was coming from Canada into the United States. That was very telling. That was very, very telling. They're not. And my brother lives in California, and he said he just drove down to the Port of Los Angeles just out of curiosity. He said it was almost empty. There were very few ships.
I want to talk some more about tariffs, and I definitely want to get to immigration. But before we get too far away from the question before that, which was about the capitulation of some universities and law firms, Steve, I wanted to get your take, especially on the legal side of things. What are your thoughts about that topic?
The modern presidency is kind of the fault of what Congress has allowed the presidency to be. The president has a lot of discretion in what he can do. I completely disagree with executive orders against law firms in an obvious attempt at seeking retribution. I've been on the opposite side of that, not as a presidential target, but as a target of other politicians and lawyers. When I served in a case as co-counsel for the Trump campaign from 2020, I saw the ugly side of that from the other way, and I had presumed that the Republicans wouldn't do the same thing, and I'm discouraged at that. retribution like that is it's just not productive. The president's discretion needs to be reined in by Congress. I don't know if Congress can do that, but wow, the president is just so powerful today, always has been. And when Jay said at the beginning, we've been kind of in a place before where presidents have scoffed at courts, and I think of Jefferson, but the president wasn't as powerful before.
And I think your point as you started this is that part of the reason that the president has been able to assume so much power is because Congress hasn't been doing its job for so long. They've been in such gridlock. They refuse to work together. They, one side of the aisle demonizes the other, and, compromise has become a dirty word. And God forbid we should actually work towards solutions on behalf of the American people, which is why they were elected in the first place. So
exactly.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I say we've created one symptom is we've created an administrative state where Congress has delegated all kinds of authority to administrative agencies. So you get a different president in. And I was surprised at how much President Trump was able to do with his administration and DOGE and other things. But you get a new president in, and you get agency enforcement going the other way sometimes. Mm-hmm. Especially, I think of environmental regulations. But
okay, so you mentioned DOGE. So I want to get to DOGE and I want to get to immigration. So you just mentioned DOGE. So let's talk about that. And I remember that part of what you, Steve, said during our St. Louis event was that, and again, this goes back to the ineffectiveness of Congress and it not doing its job. And I think maybe it was Kathy who made this point, Kathy Kiley, one of our other panelists, who said something to the effect of, you get to the point where, people want some sort of change and Congress is not acting. And then you get a guy with a chainsaw, and it's something that happens over a period of time. So I guess my question is, when we met on March 6th, DOGE was just getting underway. It has, a lot has been done since then. Thousands and thousands of people have lost jobs. Entire agencies have been shut down. And in some cases, some of those people have been rehired because, oops, we didn't mean to fire them because they actually have important jobs. And then some of those agencies are like partially back online. So Jay, talk a little bit about, from a constitutional perspective, and I know you said before, and I want you to make the point again, that DOGE itself, in your opinion, is constitutional. So explain why that is, and how is it possible that it's been able to do the damage that it's done to the actual infrastructure of the country? So I'll leave it there.
Well, I think the distinction is, is it constitutional for a president to delegate power to, a reformist committee or mission within the administrative executive branch? And, you can do that, but it can also take extra or unconstitutional actions. And I think the courts are currently reviewing some of those things. For instance, when there's legislative funding of certain bodies, that the executive isn't supposed to be able to just make it vanish. So constitutional set something like that up. Did it act constitutionally? I think not in some instances, and we'll see in due course. But gosh, what is the big lesson of this whole DOGE thing? We hardly knew you. They were here for 2.5, 3 months. What it is it's like a hurricane. It's purely destructive. Okay, it just rips through and wreaks damage upends the way the whole system worked, and then it moves on to something else. And so I actually think that the bigger question now is forward facing, is like, is it literally like after a hurricane where things are just rebuilt like they were? Will it have the lasting impact? And, part of me actually is thinking that there will, the answer will probably be mixed, but I bet you it won't have done as much long lasting damage as we think. And part of the reason, Linda, as you hinted at, is actually a lot of these functions are really important, and people are starting to realize that you have to have experts in these government positions. So time will tell, but that to me is the big question.
So I'm gonna push back a little bit on one thing that you said, and maybe you didn't mean it this way, but even though, so Elon's gone, from the day to day with DOGE, but DOGE is still very much there. DOGE is still very much active. And even though there have not been as many headlines since Musk left Washington, I have seen stories and I have heard commentary that DOGE is very much still working behind the scenes in ways that we might not be cognizant of. And then the other thing that is most distressing to me is the fact that our personal information has been pilfered and is now in the hands of God knows who. How could that happen? And I mean, what recourse do we have? I mean, I personally, and I'm sure every American who's given two thoughts about this feels violated. And where does that come back to bite us at some point in the future? Where, how, when? How could that have happened? It boggles my mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're absolutely right that DOGE is still behind the scenes and it's still doing its work and probably will continue throughout the Trump administration. I suppose I was meaning that the political and social momentum for that kind of project, it's two things. One, it's kind of burnt itself out. In the sense is this going to be like a winning thing that you see future candidates running for office on? This will be a permanent part of a new political project? I don't know. And part of the reason I don't know is because it's really generated, it took time, but it's generated powerful dissenting organizations and a counter politics against DOGE. And I would see the DOGE stuff in relation to the new tax bill that's coming through as well. When you're like, actually at the end of the day, this isn't saving money. This is just actually causing damage in the efficiency of government. And we're going to make our deficit problem even worse. And if you look at issues throughout American history, sorry, I'm jumping around here, Linda, but if you look at issues in American history that have generated real powerful either third parties or political counter movements, the budget deficit has been a recurring one, especially in recent times. And normally it's been exploited by those on the political right, but not always, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I see this combination of reckless cuts to government and, as you say, the divulging of personal data and information, the infiltration of AI systems, which we don't really understand, into our government apparatus. I see that. And then the fiscal irresponsibility as kind of linked projects, or ones that might be linked in the minds of a shrewd politician or political movement that might emerge from the ashes of all this.
So I know the solution to all our problems. And I say this in every speech I've given. And the Missouri State School Board Association, Jay, in Branson, Missouri, gave me a standing ovation when I said this. So one of the last presidents to balance a budget would be George Herbert Walker Bush in 1990. And he had two houses of Democrats, but Congress was all Democrats. He used that word that Linda mentioned earlier. What did he do? Oh, he compromised. He agreed to slightly raise taxes in exchange for the Democrats had to agree to more budget cuts. And he literally wrote in his diary the day he agreed to this, I probably just made myself a one-term president, but it's what's right for America. Voters can no longer support or vote for politicians who cannot put that in their diary, who quit voting, and everything they think and promote and do is about winning their next election, or getting on Fox News, or getting on CNN, or getting a big following on social media. We need, every voter in America needs to go to a town hall meeting and ask anyone running for office, would you be able to write in your diary, I probably just made myself a one-term congressman, senator, city council member, but it's what's right for my country. And the voters have the power to fix this. But in some ways, we're as do nothing as Congress. Although, Jay, you mentioned rising social protests. I think it's wonderful. I think we all need to get out there and tell people how we feel, no matter what side you're on. No matter what your political beliefs are, we need to be more outspoken and more vocal about how we feel about what's going on.
I love that historical perspective, Jean.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, we have to talk about immigration. I mean, it's like the big elephant in every room at this point. So I don't even know. I mean, there's so many places we could go with this, but I know, part of what President Trump got elected on was on securing the border. Regardless of, how you think he might have, what tactics he used in order to do that, the border's pretty much secure, the southern border at this point, in terms of statistics, if you look at the stats and the crossings and how much they're down, et cetera. But this whole specter, not just specter, but the mass deportations that are happening, the actual targeting now of blue cities, including the one that Jean and I are sitting in right now, for ICE raids. What's been happening in Los Angeles, the federalization of the National Guard is one issue. We've kind of already covered that piece of it. But I know a lot of people voted for President Trump because they wanted him to get his arms around our immigration situation. So Steve, I would love to get your perspective as we start this part of the conversation and see kind of what you're thinking about where we are, what he's done thus far. How are you feeling about it as someone who understands how and why President Trump was elected?
Well, yeah, thanks. I'm feeling very conflicted because first and foremost, we need immigrants desperately. We need a sane and more than sane, a productive immigration policy. And for years, I've yelled at Congress saying, they've done nothing on this. When you talk about deportations, and I haven't researched this in depth about who's being deported. Are any people that are being deported, where I don't know where they are in the immigration court process. I used to, at DOJ, part of what I was asked to do was to file Board of Immigration Appeals in the federal circuit courts. And so if you had an order to appear and you didn't appear as an immigrant, then you are here illegally and you can be deported. So one thing that frustrates me is that the prior administration allowed chaos. And then you have a crackdown now. The crackdown on a lot of fronts, I think, has been too extreme. But sometimes, as Jay said with the universities, the silver lining, I guess, is that we rethink what we have been doing and reassess. on immigration, it's been such a mess where we've encouraged people to immigrate illegally. Blue cities have said we're not going to enforce federal law within our cities. Well, then, can Congress even fix the problem if certain jurisdictions ignore federal law?
Mm-hmm.
It's just wild back and forth, and we need to get to a sensible middle.
I agreed. And so a couple of points I want to make to pick up on what you said. Just want to remind folks that during the last administration, it was while the campaign was going on, there was a bipartisan immigration bill that would have addressed all of this.
Yes.
And it included bringing more judges, more asylum judges into the system. It included all the stuff, a lot of the things that really needed to happen. And a lot of the Democrats on the more liberal side were very angry that this bill that they had compromised on this bill. And the reason it didn't go forward is because President Trump told them told the Republicans,
right,
do not let this bill pass because I want to run on immigration. So
and
there's that.
I wish a few of those Republicans would have said, I just voted for something today that may have ended my career.
That's the point that Gene was. There you go. Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. So we're in agreement on that.
Oh,
Then
absolutely.
the second piece is you talked about, the adjudication, not the adjudication process, but when people who are here undocumented are called into court and they have to appear, et cetera. Well, what's happening now is that those people who are doing that are being arrested. They're being deported. They're being arrested by, we assume, ICE agents. In many cases, they're not identifying themselves. Why are they masked? To me, that's just like if somebody walked up to me and they have a mask on and they don't identify themselves and they start to drag me and put me in a car, I'm thinking I'm being kidnapped. And if this is the federal government, then why aren't they doing this transparently in the light of day without masks and identifying clearly which agency they are representing? So there's all of that. And then on top of that, the lack of due process. Yeah. So, Jay, I see you shaking your head in agreement, so I'll let you pick up from there.
No, I shouldn't have derailed you. You were totally right. I mean, this is the one, guys, where I'm most disappointed in our compatriots. In the sense of, I guess I totally understood, or I misunderstood. I thought that the Trump position was about building the wall, stopping the immigration. That was popular. That was a problem, as Steve was saying. There were solutions out there, but politicians are always going to exploit issues, as disgraceful as that is, at least in this era. But where I'm disappointed is I thought that there would be more of a cross-spectrum, bipartisan objection to the type of deportations lacking the due process and the legitimacy that you just described, Linda. That's where I thought that even the majority of your Trump voters would look at that and say, that is a horrible abomination. And if we allow the federal government to do that, have guys jump out in ski masks and grab foreign students or grab agricultural workers. If we allow the government to do that, well, then when our opponents win the next election, they're going to be doing the same thing. Like, that's the sort of logic that you should be using. So it's very, very disappointing.
Well,
you know what else? Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, especially, I'm going to agree with you, especially when the president changes his mind on who he's deporting. When he suddenly gets an epiphany that, we need the agricultural workers, so we're not. I'm going to stop
and
that
the leisure
now.
and the leisure workers
In the leisure world.
The leisure
The
workers.
housekeepers, the people who clean our motel rooms.
He's really talking about hospitality industry.
He's really
but yeah.
talking about hotel housekeepers.
Yeah. Which,
Now, what I don't understand is the due process concern.
Right.
I don't know where in the process, because you come in undocumented and you're issued an order to appear at immigration court and then you're let go. At least that's the way it was in the past. And if you don't appear, for that immigration court hearing, then that's it. You can be deported. And if you do appear and the judge rules against you, I mean, there's an appeal process. So there should be. My experience is there's a lot of due process afforded to people who come here undocumented.
But that takes time, and it takes respect of institutions and following norms. And these are the things that the administration just has proven time and time again to be unwilling to do. And what I was going to transition it to another thing that I'm disappointed in. I don't know. You can cut this out, Linda, but the graft, the corruption. This is another way in which a real dangerous set of norms have been broken and new precedents are probably being established. The alliance with crypto and the way in which the fund, I mean, it is absolute graft and corruption. We all know it. It's just something that gets like elbowed out of the front pages. And so people aren't as upset about this as they should. Mm-hmm. But if I was to look back historically and think about, what are the winning formulas for protest politics? The winning formula, one, I think, is actually on like federal deficit. For some reason, Americans always get worked up about that. I think another one is corruption of a political class or a political elite, or in this case, a family at the top of American politics. If people understood what's going on, I think they'd be much more up in arms.
I'm thinking that you're not going to buy a Trump phone. Are you not up for? I should not. I sort of had that on my Christmas list. For you, Jay.
I already invested it all into the Bitcoin, into the Trump Bitcoin. I don't have any money left.
Oh my God! So I've seen actually a lot more stories about the grift, the graft, all of it in recent weeks.
Yeah.
Reporters actually digging and tallying up the millions and millions of dollars that not only President Trump but his entire family have made since taking office, and it's staggering and it's disgusting. It truly is. And so okay, as we start to wrap this up, I want to get back to the we the people part. We've seen, we saw the No Kings protest, estimated 5 million Americans across the country in every state coming out. And, the vast majority of those protests, peaceful, people exercising their constitutional right to express their opinions, juxtaposed with the military parade, $45 million of taxpayer money. Not quite sure what that was for. I know it was ostensibly about celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary, but whatever.
Couldn't we just have sent them a card?
Yeah, that would have been a lot cheaper.
Yeah. The Mint made some nice coins about it.
I guess I want to leave we the people, those who are listening and watching, with some hope about what we the people can do to try and get our country back on course in a way that makes sense for all of us and that we're all feeling good about the country, regardless of what our political ideology might be. So I'm going to throw that up for grabs, and whoever wants to jump in, jump in.
I just think we need the peaceful demonstrations all the time. And that is not exciting, but that's what the people need to do. We need the interest to continue and not just at certain hot points.
Linda, one time I was complaining to President Bush about the Republican Party. It's when I told him that he deserved to know that his chief of staff no longer considered himself a Republican. And he said to me, "You were never that good of one to begin with." It's one of my favorite things he ever said to me. But, and you've heard me talk about this, Linda, he looked at me and he said, "Jean, when's the last time you went to a precinct meeting? When's the last time you went to a town hall meeting? When's the last time you volunteered for a campaign?" I hadn't done any of those things. And he's right. I'd never been to a precinct meeting. I didn't go to town hall meetings. And I go back to, that we need to hold our office holders more accountable for what their real job is. And in order to do that, I urge everybody to go to a town hall meeting, to write letters, to let your congressman know what you think, to go to a precinct meeting. Think about running for office. I hope some people who are listening to us will run for office, but we're going to have to get our hands dirty, people. We cannot sit on the couch and throw things on our TV set. That's not being a good citizen.
Love it. Okay, Jay, you get.
I just thought the No Kings thing was brilliant. Loved the name and the branding of it. Loved how it wasn't just your kind of far left interest groups or activists. It was a much broader cross section of Americans by all accounts, and that it was overwhelmingly peaceful. That might be the most important message because, the other dark thing is the appearance of political violence within our system. And that's not just from the Minnesota stuff from over the weekend, but that is an escalating, slow burning, kind of long running process over the last 10 or 15 years. And in order to nip that in the bud, it's not just that we have to control crazy people and their guns. It's that we all have to denounce that. And you denounce that by modeling other types of political and social activism and behavior. And I thought that the No Kings thing did that too. And actually, I was never thrilled about a military parade. I thought that was just kind of weird, but I don't think it was as bad as some people feared. And that the Army, the military, has always been such an important social institution in this country, as well as a aggregation of hard power. And anyone watching that would have seen that from the different soldiers walking through, and that the Army is independent. That's one of the most important things. It's not just the courts that are the guardrails; it's the Army ultimately. And I think its independence was exhibited during that parade.
So the last thing I want to leave people with is you got to vote.
Yes.
In the last presidential election, an estimated 150 million Americans voted. An estimated 90 million did not vote. That has to change. That has to change. You cannot bellyache about, where we are as a country. If you don't like where we are, if you don't get involved. I had a conversation with somebody that I met last weekend, just by happenstance. And she didn't vote in the last election. And I was beside myself. I said, "Why did you not vote?" I didn't like either candidate. I said, "That's not acceptable. That is not acceptable. A non-vote is a vote." It is. And so if we truly want to see the change that we want, we have to be the change that we want. And we have to engage. And one of the ways, obviously, that we're doing it at Civil Dialogues is in a town hall setting where we create a safe space where we can have these kinds of conversations. It's not easy to talk about this stuff, but we're getting better and better at it. Jean, I think you and I are getting better and better at it, and we're creating, I believe, an environment where people feel that it's okay to come and ask a question, knowing that the question they ask might reveal what their political ideology is. And that's okay. Nobody's going to shout you down. Nobody's going to call you a bad name. Nobody's going to kick you out and make you feel like the other. And we need to have more places and spaces where Americans feel free to do that. And for goodness sakes, put your phone down and stop texting to each other.
Yes.
And have a conversation, eyeball to eyeball, warm-blooded human to warm-blooded human. Not on a screen, across a screen, not over text, but actually talking to someone. It makes all the difference in the world. And as Brene Brown says, it is really hard to hate up close. And when you see the look on somebody's face after you've uttered something that hurt their feelings, it will make you recoil. You will think twice before you use those words in a hurtful way again. So I'm off my soapbox. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. Jean, thanks for joining me for this episode. And I can't wait for our next town hall. So thank you guys.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Another reminder that if you happen to be in the Kansas City, Missouri area on July 22nd, please come join us at our Civil Dialogues Town Hall at the Kansas City Public Library. It starts at 6 p.m. Central. If you're not in the area, you will be able to log on to the live stream. Just go to the Civil Dialogues website, civildialogues.us, a little bit closer to the date, and you'll be able to find the link to upload. So, I really enjoyed that conversation. We covered a lot of ground, still got a few things that we didn't quite get to, but that's okay. We're going to continue the conversation in Kansas City. Really appreciate you being a part of the Our Voices Matter audience and part of the Civil Dialogues audience and community. Very much appreciate you. Please spread the word, invite others to join us, and then we'll see you next time.